What's good, everybody? How's everyone doing? Hopefully well. Before you guys continue on this video, I put out some new music, so go listen to it, go download it. If you don't want to buy it, it is available for free. It's kind of one of those pay what you want deals. This video right here is going to be talking about transitions. I am going to have this project file, sorry, not the project file, but the stems available for you on Patreon. And this is designed to help you guys who have been asking me those kinds of questions of how do I make transitions or how do I make better transitions and all that stuff. So the way that I'm actually reformatting a lot of Patreon stuff is going to be centered around videos like this, where once a month I will be posting something very specific on how to cover topics, and then I'll send you guys the stems to allow you to work on exercises with. All right, advertisements out the way. Let's talk about how to make transitions. There's a lot of different ways to do it. And today we're going to be working with this really short project that I put together. It's got a sub, it's got some glitch effects, some textures along that line, and basically it's just a couple of musical, or I guess a few musical components that we can use in order to create different fills and all that stuff. So generally speaking, like transitions is kind of like a loose term because some people might actually describe a break or a bridge as a transition, and those rules still apply. It's more so just about like the length of it, if that makes sense. But typically, whenever speaking, we want to talk about transitions that usually happen on the turnaround, which is the last either bar or last 4 bars of a beat, or something that is getting ready to signify that a new cycle or a new pattern is going to be introduced, or we're going to repeat the same pattern. Yeah. So while this is 2 bars, it's technically 4 because we're at 70 BPM, and basically you have a lot of different things to work with. So I'm kind of like, I've got a list right here, and this isn't going to be one of those comprehensive guide videos because there's just a million different transitions that you can cover. But within this already, there's already a few that you can kind of take and keep in mind whenever you're thinking about doing different stuff. So let me go ahead and pull up this list right here to make sure that I'm going to stay on track, and we will kind of just start talking about different ideas or different strategies that you can use in order to help your music become more interesting. Because nobody likes when it's just the same thing over and over and over and over again. And I find that like the better your transitions, the more interesting your music. Like even if it's going to be the same exact idea, if you have a sick transition, then it will help keep somebody in that pocket of rhythm. So the first one that I want to cover is really just using stutters or glitch effects to kind of fill things up. So if you look at the last bar right here, there's just a little fill of stutter effects that have the same sample, which sounds like this. And that's a really easy thing that you can do, like especially if you want to make the snare a little bit more short. And while this bass fill is here, technically, we can also remove that. And you kind of have this little space of having something go. And sometimes a minimalistic approach is really good, especially if you have a lot of stuff going on, like a lot of noise or a lot of frequency range filled. So sometimes going the minimal route is a great way to kind of just fill that out. Something else that you can think about doing is actually taking one of these reverse samples and basically just like, and these are like the bare bones, guys. So just kind of take it for what you will, yeah? One thing that you can do right here is to kind of shorten up this, and you can use a reverse sample to kind of fill into the next part. And you see, like using those kinds of fills of just a long, elongated reverse sample is kind of like an excellent way to go about as well. Something that I do pretty often. Sometimes this isn't enough though, right? So sometimes if we want to expand on this, then we can basically change different pitches or change some of the formants if you guys are working with something that you can manipulate audio in. So just adding like a short little pitch riser from -2 to 0 or to its fundamental pitch can sometimes add a little bit of interest as well. The more that you stretch it out, the more that the format will be affected. I might have to switch the warp mode, but sometimes like if you mess with this in some other ways, you can also get some interesting results as well. So if I come over here and just, okay, so obviously that didn't do anything, but let's go ahead and switch this to cycles mode and see how that sounds. Okay, so we ended up getting like an unpredictable sound right here, and that ended up actually sounding pretty cool. And you can kind of see that by using these like few simple things, like they're actually a lot more effective than you think. And some people are like, or I guess a lot more simple than you think rather. So, you know, and these samples can be anything. Like I have a reverse snare right here that is, you know, kind of basically handling that for me, but it literally can be anything. One overlooked really simple transition, and I know that we're only using maybe like half of a bar. This is a quarter bar by technical terms, but because we're doing something at a halftime thing, is doing a drum fill. And I'm not really going to spend a lot of time programming one just because that will take too long and we have a lot of stuff to cover. But if I type in drum fill and you want to add something right here, let me go ahead and deactivate that. Okay. Sure, we can go ahead and give that a try. Obviously, that's stretched out to the point to where it's not really usable, but if we take this right here and we kind of plug that in, maybe have, let's try that. So, okay, so that doesn't quite work just yet, but if I activate this and maybe use that with a kick, and let's try that. Okay. This might actually be kind of cool, like, and sometimes it's not just automatically usable, right? So if we put a little bit of work into this and kind of just spend some time on it. Is there any warping on this? Oh, that's the formant, sorry. We can pull this up. Okay, that would actually be kind of cool maybe if we do that here, and now if we actually take this out. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut this and take that drum fill and stretch this last component out right here. And together we're kind of just reusing the same sample to create something. Okay, now this is a really hard kick right here, so it might actually be kind of cool to take these and shorten them like this. All right, it's not quite there. Okay, let's take this one and let's go ahead and maybe turn the pitch up on this. All right, help me out here. There we go. So, and it might even be kind of cool as well because there's like a lot of jarring kind of motion that's happening through this to shorten up this. This is going to help us smooth out the transition by having some kind of reverse sample to layer on top of it. But if we go ahead and maybe pan some of these to the left and right, then you can create some more interesting effects. And that's part of the reason why I like working on transitions so much, is because they really allow you to do really anything. And it's an immediate, like, instant gratification from just taking a resample and being able to apply it. It's like if you have a cool sound, you don't know what to do with it, just throw it in as a transition. And sometimes, you know, maybe the kick didn't work, maybe the snare would work as well. But if we wanted to kind of like add on top of this idea, then we can do like a doom, doom, doom. Sorry, let me come on over here and dun, dun, dun. Maybe we can expand on that idea as well by adding a little bit more interesting things and just kind of like filling up some of the spaces within rhythm and kind of going crazy with it. So sometimes, like, whenever you have a transition, you might run into something where you might feel like the transition is cool, but you might have to have a transition for a transition. And if that kind of like happens, like, don't fret. In fact, what you can usually do is take an element from your transition, and you're going to kind of like notice a pattern whenever like we get deeper into this video of using something, some kind of signal or some kind of hint, whatever you want to claim it as, into switching up into something else or switching up into whatever it is that you're trying to introduce. And that's kind of what it is. It's like if something sounds a little bit too jarring, you can use a transition or you allude that something is getting ready to happen and therefore make everything fit. Okay, that's almost there, but not quite. So I'm going to stretch this out again, maybe this long, and let's go ahead and kind of fade that in. And while it's not perfect, you can kind of see that this will allow you to kind of do some stuff in between. So let's say like you have a really long note, and we talked about doing like stutter stuff and all that. One thing that you can do is you can take some of those components like this, and we're just going to go ahead and stretch this out all the way. And then I'm going to bounce this in place. Let's listen to that. And I'm just going to bring back that last thing here. So there's a sound. It's not great and it's not perfect, but what we can do is we can right click and go slice in place. And let's just do maybe 1/16 notes. Sorry, maybe go into 1/64 because I wanted this to be just a little bit more cutty. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Command and then click on every other one, kind of like that. So I'm only selecting whatever I click on and then just hit delete. And now we should have a... And sometimes it's cool to maybe join all of these in such a way, and then we can kind of go back and actually I'm going to bounce this in place and then go and do more processing to it. And it's really just a matter of like how deep or how far you want to go into making more so out of the transition. And literally like the cycles and stuff that you can do with this is relatively limitless. So let's go ahead and keep this transition here, but what I'm going to do instead is go onto the master channel, and you can apply a filter anywhere. I'm just going to do it on the master just for the sake of context, I guess. By default, I have a randomizer on that, so I'm going to start from here, and we're going to go into doing some actual automation, which would be the next thing. So I'm going to kind of come right here, and forgive me if the organization of this is relatively like sporadic, but some of this I need to create on the fly as they inspire more ideas, because like it's, as I'm creating these, I'm getting them off of ideas that I'm going from, as opposed to having like a predispositioned thing that's premeditated, I guess is what I should have said. Okay, so once this comes on, we're basically going to set this effect to be on during this part and then turn itself back off, because we're going to have a pretty low thing. So what we'll do is we'll just kind of have this sweep up in this way. And now we've made kind of like a compound transitional effect that it goes to. Cool. You know, and if we want to as well, like maybe that is just a little bit too abrupt, right? And those are the kinds of things that we want to be aware of. Well, we can still go and apply some of those same other skills that we're talking about. This needs to be long again. And that kind of helps build a longer transition of, hey, something's getting ready to happen, and then you introduce the change, and then it kind of goes right back into keeping the same rhythm, if that makes sense. Let's see, what else can we do to this? One thing that could be cool as well is you can bounce out the entire section. I'm just going to take maybe this part though, and I'm going to come onto this and hit Command B, and then I'm going to create a new track. And by default, this is already in time. And what we can do if we just need more material or whatever is just stretch the heck out of this in such a way and find some kind of cut or some kind of interesting motion with this that... Okay, so that sounds kind of cool. What I'm going to do though is maybe grab a filter. For the sake of time, I'm going to do two. One of them I'm going to leave the notch on like this because it's going to do its own thing, and then the other one I'm going to do the same thing where we have another filter movement, but this time maybe let's do like a high pass, just for the sake of being different, because I don't want you guys to get used to doing the same exact thing over and over again, where we will dip this out, and then at the very end here, we'll bring that back in for just a moment. So now let's listen to this. Cool. Sorry, I wanted to listen to it a couple times because I enjoy this kind of music creation stuff. Okay, let's go ahead and do the bass swells next. Let me just go ahead and find some kind of cut. Okay. I have no idea where this came from, but it's from somebody, so we're just going to go ahead and use that right here. And we could have just used the sub if we wanted to as well, because it definitely works. But let's just pretend like, you know, this is like our mid bass or whatever. And really, like, if you do any kind of sound design jams or if you follow the MudPie thing, that's kind of okay as well. But it's more so about taking this and kind of figuring out a way to introduce this. And this is an effective thing to do if you want to change up the bass line or introduce a new sound, because previously before, if we look, this sound has never been used through the rest of this tune. So if you're like, oh man, like this bass line doesn't fit, or I haven't found a way to kind of use this yet, you can do some of the same processing that we did here. I'm just going to go ahead and copy that, except I'm going to change that here, and then I'm going to flip this in such a way that is going to be maybe some kind of movement pattern of some sort, kind of like that. And then you can kind of tell, like, this is way too freaking loud compared to the rest of the... And then if you want to get creative with it, then you can do some kind of pitch bending and stuff, of course. So like you can take something right here, and a lot of times I'll just do a random click and see if like any small part of this is interesting. Okay, so maybe we like that, but it's not really enough. So what we can do is we can detune this a bit, kind of like this. And then instead of having a filter on both, we can just copy that and delete this. And I'm not really worried about like phase or like making this bass hit hard, because for one, like most people actually take out their lows of their mid basses anyways, but two, this is an effect, it's a transition, so I don't have to worry so much about like this kind of like bass thing that I'm manipulating having to be incredibly complex or like, you know, fit right, or, you know, be completely in mono on the low end. It's an effect. Do whatever the heck you want. And basically what we did was we just detuned both of these a little bit so you get some kind of flanging effect. Let me turn these off for a sec. Maybe we want to go a little bit further with that if you're into the squelchy type thing, so we can turn these back on and then we can add something like a frequency shifter. The options to creating transitions are relatively limitless, and you'll find that a lot of times whenever you're trying to create something that's more complex, it's just about like how many sound design tricks do you know, and then you just take one and combine it, or you take two and combine it, or take three, or do whatever it is that you want to do. Some other things that we can also do are bouncing out the whole thing, throwing this into granulator. So if I want to basically find something interesting within this, I can bounce this whole thing out. And then what I'll do is I can stretch this out and throw this into Les Sampler. And then from here, I can go into the textures mode and find something interesting. I'm not going to pull anything out of this. I'm just going to show you the capabilities. And when I play this, any of that stuff, all you have to do is just replace it right here and make that fit, and then apply the same effects processing or filters or whatever it is that you want to do, if that makes sense. And like, to be honest, like transitions should be easy for you guys, especially if you want to do something complex. And if you understand the idea of resampling, then that just like opens up that many more possibilities. But really the only thing that you have to keep in mind is just do something that's a little bit of a change, and then make sure that it fits, or that there's something that leads up to it if it's completely contrasting. But don't be afraid to be like, you know, oh man, I can't think of a transition. Okay, we'll resample the whole thing and then just plug some granular thing in there, or keep the same beat but filter it in. Or, you know, if you have musical components, which I was also going to cover, but I don't really have anything. Actually, I can just type in something like F mine and see if anything pulls up. Sure. We can take a Vox and do the exact same thing of maybe just reversing here. What I'll do this time though is I'm actually going to stretch this out and lead this in, kind of like that. I'm going to delete this stuff, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to double this and place it here. So now this particular thing should be a little bit longer. So now we have a little bit more time for these two things to develop. So I'm going to deactivate all that stuff and then still keep this little reverse thing right here, and let's see how that sounds.
Lonely in the morning, 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 lonely in the
See, it fits because you're giving a signal and you're also allowing space to kind of come in. And that's kind of like the most powerful thing that you can use is just being aware of saying, hey, I want something to switch up or be different right here. How many different ways do I know how to do that? So the last thing that I'm going to leave you guys with is something that is not going to be in the stems of this, but is just something that I do on every track. I pretty much got this idea from a Mephews tutorial, and I've been doing it in my tunes ever since. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a return channel, or an effect channel rather. So let's go right click, add an effect track, and then I'm just going to make this like really simple, okay? Just so that way it's easier to do. But typically what I would do is I'd group this and turn this all the way down. Maybe add like a Pro Q, turn this up here and take out all the low end stuff. Okay, so this is going to serve as our mix function. And the reason why I do this like group return layer or effect layer, whatever you want to call it, is because I can do the same processing with one thing to all of them, and I just appreciate the format of how this works. But if I wanted to make this seem like it's going to be like a bigger impact or something, then I will start from 0, and whenever I want this to lead in, I will turn this up to here, and then we'll lead that up to be like really big and wide, and then as soon as the next bar comes, we're just going to shut it off completely. So that actually didn't work, and the reason why is because we didn't send anything to the return channels. So let's go ahead and take care of that and take all this stuff, and I'm just going to group everything. Whenever I actually give you guys the stems, you are going to have to do this on your own, and I'm doing that on purpose, and it's not because I don't like you, it's because I want you to practice, which I'll get into towards the end of this video, which we're getting pretty close. But okay, so I forgot that we actually had the filter on there, but it still applies, so or, you know, if that doesn't fit for you, you can definitely just kind of come down here and change the pitch of it. That's kind of silly, but you guys get the idea, right? So doing like reverb fills or reverse things, or if you have mid basses, you can obviously like bounce that out as well. But there's so many different things that you can do in order to find these transitions that are right for you and just resample stuff, you know, and create a complex rhythm or change something that's totally different. And there's no right or wrong. The only thing that you really need to pay attention to is having a way to lead into it and a way to get out of it. So that's why I always rely on these like reverse samples to kind of like signal that the shift is going to come back to whatever it is that it's supposed to be. But the context, it's not really, I mean, I had no idea what I was going to do today other than cover these topics, but I wanted to kind of do this organically, kind of like I do some other videos, to show you that it's really just kind of a matter of whatever you want to do. Try to make sure that this isn't so much louder than the rest of your tune, and if it is, or there's something that's completely different, then bounce the transition out itself and then try to match the levels. That's how you can actually like apply it in an actual tune. But yeah, man, just go crazy with effects and stuff, or go crazy with resampling, and you're good to go. One thing that I'm going to start doing is that if you guys want to send your sounds in, or if you guys want to record videos of you guys making your transitions, I am going to start featuring all of my patrons at the end of the month and talking about, or doing like kind of like a review based off of the skill that I'm presenting. So that way you guys can show off some of your stuff, and that way I can also acknowledge and thank you guys personally for being my patrons. So if you guys are interested in joining my Patreon and you guys want to practice this transition with these stems, or these transition, you know, skills rather, and you want to show off your stuff, then please feel free to do so, because I think it's a great way to interact with the community. So yeah, that's about it, guys. There's not really a whole lot more to it, yet there is. It's just a matter of what effects do you like and what kind of things do you want to introduce. If you want something that's more melodically driven, you can also do like a key change or something. That's not really the kind of stuff that I do, but really I kind of just want to shed some light on how easy it is to create transitions and how easy it is to make everything seem like it is more complex just by taking one little piece of time of your tune and throwing something else in there, and it can literally be anything. I really feel like with transition, guys, like as long as you know where you want to go, the transition itself should be super cake. The only time that you ever get lost on a transition is when you don't know where to go after the tune. And for me personally, like let's say this is 8 bars or something, and I'm getting ready to either go into a B section or a break, I could still use any of these transitions to get there. It's just I might take a piece from the next section or a piece from the section before in order to kind of link them together. And that's kind of the beauty of resampling, is it allows you to create originality and enhance the storytelling because you're using the same elements, if that makes sense. So yeah, I know this was a really long video, but this will be available for June's rewards. It's only going to be a few stems, but hopefully the information along with this will be useful to you all. But that's all I got for you guys today. Good luck with your transitions, and if for my patrons, send me what you got at the end of the month, and I'd be more than happy to put something together and actually just take a look at all of your transitions and see what you guys are doing and maybe talk about some ideas. I think that would be really fun. So, yeah, I'll see you guys later.